Welcome back, everybody, to the Mystical Rebel channel. Most likely here on Patreon, being that this is a Patreon exclusive. If you happen to be watching a clip of the Patreon exclusive somewhere else, please do consider joining the Patreon, patreon.com/The Mystics Conclave. But let's just dive right into it. This is the exclusive Baphomet video. We're going to be doing a presentation. As you guys know, that's my favored teaching or lesson format is presentations. I think that they are a good way to present a lot of information and still keep people engaged and interested and, all that good stuff. So we have a presentation going here, and this is going to be on Baphomet. And I think this is going to be really enlightening for a lot of people. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about who Baphomet is, his origins, what he represents, his usage in modern day. And this video is going to touch on a bit of all of that. And so I hope you get a lot out of this video. Unless you are a devotee of Baphomet or have studied Baphomet extensively, a lot of this information may be relatively new. But I hope you like it either way, and let's just go ahead and dive right in. So we've got Baphomet, the alchemy of dualities, and the evolution of an esoteric icon. Let's dive right in. So this is how we're going to move through this presentation. This is our setup. We are going to move through it starting with the medieval Genesis. We're going to analyze the etymological origins, the early Crusader corruptions, and the sudden political downfall of the Knights Templar. So we're going to get into the origins of Baphomet, where he comes from, the Templars and their involvement and all that good stuff. Then we're going to move into the Hermetic synthesis. I'm going to quote that, Hermetic synthesis. We will be exploring Eliphas Levi's 19th century rebirth of the Sabbatic goat as an emblem of cosmic equilibrium and alchemical balance. So we'll be discussing how Eliphas Levi took a somewhat more medieval symbol and brought it into his modern day and rebranded it as something else, which lasts up until today. And we're going to get into that in part 3. The modern occulture, which is what I like to call it. Got that from Jason Love. I think that's a good term. We're going to be tracking the co-optation by LaVeyan Satanism, the 20th century conspiracy panics, and contemporary constitutional activism, which is a fancy way of saying modern day Satanists. So this is what the presentation is going to look like. This is how it's going to be set up. So that way you're aware of how we're going to be moving. So let us continue. So part 1, the Genesis. From Crusader crises to the trials of the Knights Templar. So the first mention of Baphomet, right? The first time we ever see Baphomet mentioned is actually in the year 1098. Right? The earliest documented appearance of Baphomet emerges not from a dark coven, of witches or something, but from military dispatches during the First Crusade. So contrary to what you might want to believe in the YouTube conspiracy videos about Satanism and celebrity selling their soul and everybody worships Aleister Crowley and the Great Beast and all this other stuff, those videos and those creators might want to tell you that Baphomet, was worshipped by ancient witches and Satanists and demonologists and all that other stuff. Or demonolateurs, I guess I should say. Those are the ones that worship demons, not demonologists. Those are people that just study demons. that these people worshipped Baphomet, right? When in actuality, the first appearance of Baphomet, like not just mention or anything like that, the first time Baphomet is seen, heard of, spoken of, mentioned is in a military dispatch during the First Crusade. In a letter dated July 1098, French crusader Anselm of Ribemont described the siege of Antioch, claiming the defending forces called upon Baphomet before battle. But get this, linguists confirm this spelling was a northern French phonetic corruption of Mahomet or Muhammad, reflecting Europe's total lack of familiarity with Islamic theology. Of course, at that time. Now it's a little different, much different. But at that time, they had really little knowledge of Muslim or Islamic theology. And so for them to hear people saying Muhammad or anything like that with their accent and, with the English or the Italians not really understanding and maybe hearing Baphomet may have actually been them yelling about praise to Muhammad or peace be unto Muhammad rather than worshiping some pagan goat-headed demon deity. So that was the first mention of Baphomet. It was in a military dispatch during the First Crusade, not some witch's grimoire or depicted on some cave wall or something along those lines. Sorry, I left my vape all the way over there. It was during the Crusade, or at least the First Crusade. So let's continue. So, continuing with the Mahomet corruption, phonetic mutations. In Old French literature and chansons de geste, authors routinely altered foreign names, right? Mahomet slowly morphed into variations like Baphomet or Baphomets and Baphomet or Baphomet, however some people might say that. Rather than describing a separate entity, medieval poetry used these terms loosely to represent any non-Christian spiritual system, right? So it's sort of like, calling someone a pagan or whatever. It's just anything that's non-Christian. Whereas Baphomet, sort of was used in poetry during medieval times to represent, due to phonetic mutations, to represent any sort of pagan deity, right? The myth of pagan idolatry. Medieval Catholic writers frequently projected their own customs onto other cultures. No, you don't say, Rebel. Falsely claiming Muslims worshipped like localized physical statues of a deity named Baphomet, right? So like I said, we already know that that's not true. This constructed caricature of exotic idol worship laid the groundwork for future accusations of heresy back in Europe. I mean, what do you expect, right, from medieval people in general, but medieval religious people, right? At the least, what do you what do you expect? Let's continue. I don't want this video to be too long. We don't want to rush through this, but we also don't want this to be an hour long if it doesn't have to be. So, the wealth of the Templars. And I think that's a really cool Templar symbol that I chose there. Monastic military order, founded in 1119 to protect pilgrims. The Knights Templar evolved into a highly disciplined elite military force in the Holy Land. So basically a gang, right? Look into the origins of any gang. I mean, at least here in America. I can't speak for other countries. But here in America, look into the origins of like a lot of these major gangs. Not necessarily their offshoots, right? Most major gangs have offshoots in certain areas that might be more popular in that area than the main gang. But look into like the main gangs, like Bloods, Crips, and those types of things, and why they were formed, right? Usually it's protection, right? Protecting the neighborhood, protecting, people of a certain race or a certain ethnicity, especially in a new or a foreign country that they were forced into, or whether or not they were forced there. They are there and they need to protect themselves. And if no one else is going to do it, and there's a bunch of us, why not we do it, right? Um, so this is a gang. This is a literal gang. The only thing about this gang is that they were, um, what's the word? There's a word I want to say and I can't think of it. It's like when you give something like the pass or like permission, but I forget, like there's like a term for that when you give something the authority to go and do things. There's a word there and I can't think of it, but they had that, right? They received some sort of like immunity, I guess, or that's not the word. I'm not looking for immunity. I don't know what I'm looking for. I can't think of it right now. But there's a word that describes like like someone more powerful than you with authority took you over, and even though what you're doing is wrong and is a crime, because you have the backing of that central authority, of that authority, it's not it's like overlooked. You have like the permission. I know there's a word for that, or some sort of a terminology, even if it's like two words or something. I know that there's a thing for that and I can't think of it, but anyway, that's what it is. Inventors of modern banking. The order managed an expansive transcontinental network of financial depositories, offering credit to travelers and merchants. And one of the ways that the Catholic Church got rich is a lot of times, when they would confiscate, um, or they would put down like rebellions and riots and stuff like that, they would confiscate land and titles and all kinds of stuff that the people, if they had them, if that the people who were doing these things, were doing, that doesn't make any sense. The people that were doing the rebellions and the riots, if they had um land, and if they had like assets, then the church would come in and take it. And there was also edicts for the church to, when it came to the shutting down of the Protestant churches, right, throughout England. They took that land, they took that wealth. It was declared for theirs. And they did the same thing to the Knights Templars. Because the Knights Templars had a lot of connections with money, gold, and stuff like that. When they were eventually outlawed and shut down, a lot of their wealth was, I mean, I'm sure a lot of it was pillaged and looted by its own members and their family and just anyone who happened to be walking by at the time. I don't know. But I'm sure quite a bit of wealth was also taken by the Catholic Church. Um, Creditors to kings. By the early 14th century, the Templars held immense political autonomy and acted as the primary lenders to multiple debt-ridden European monarchs. Sort of like the Medicis. But what goes up must come down. Nothing lasts forever. So let's talk about the Templars and their downfall, which does have to do with Baphomet. So just keep that in mind. We're not moving away from Baphomet or anything like that. So part two, the downfall. Political prosecution, financial greed, and fabrication. Can I get in trouble for doing that? The Jason or whatever he did. The Jason Friday the 13th. Why is Friday the 13th so accursed? Or should I just say cursed? What's the right way to say that? It doesn't matter. Why is Friday the 13th so unlucky? Well, In the year 1307, Friday the 13th, there was a surprise raid. Before dawn on Friday, October 13th, 1307, agents of King Philip IV of France executed a highly coordinated nationwide arrest. Because, nationwide is on your side. I had to do it. I had to throw that in there. Of all Templars residing on French soil. You're out of here. You're done for. Get out. What, you're a Templar? Done. Jail. The sudden strike shocked Europe, as the highly respected Crusader Knights were instantly dragged to dark dungeons under charges of extreme heresy. Now, I'm not going to pretend like all the Crusaders, all the Knights Templar were living in wealth, like the medieval Catholic popes, and they had palaces and all that. But imagine you're respected, you're a decorated military officer, knight, whatever chivalric orders were around back then. You're probably part of a good majority of them, and suddenly you're being dragged through the streets, probably under, obviously under, it says before dawn, so under cover of night, but not so, or not middle of the night, but right before you're about to wake up. Like if you're a farmer, you're probably getting up right around this time, right before the sun gets up, right? You're drugged through the streets into dungeons. That's a marked change in station and rank, just socially, right? Because now no one cares, and it's outlawed. So imagine having that happen, and that's what happened to the Templars. And so King Philip said, "It's over for you guys. You're done for." And continuing with his campaign against the Templars, there were some fabricated indictments. So to bypass the Pope's exclusive jurisdiction over monastic orders, which means that because the Templars were considered a holy order, only the Pope could discipline and enact what charges or whatever against this group. No one else could do that. Well, to get around that, Philip said, "Well, hold on. They are spitting on the cross during initiation rites. They're doing obscene kisses," which probably refers to the kissing of the ass and all that we used to see in the witch trials and all that, which was way after this, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like those sorts of things. And worshiping a bizarre idol. That's all. A bizarre idol. What is that bizarre idol? It could be a stick figure. Could be a rock. No shape, no form, just a pebble on the ground. But somehow it becomes Baphomet. This ancient idol, resurrected from Crusader folklore, was named in the official royal arrest warrants as Baphomet. Lies. But why not? Why not? I mean, this is a common tactic used today, right? Why not blame, the people who are causing division? And even if it's not public, right? Even if everyone in the public loves them, they're undermining the order of hierarchy in this government, right? People are looking to the Knights Templar for help rather than coming to the police or whatever they were called back in medieval times of the nation or of that whatever barony or duchy or county or whatever. Oh, sorry guys. Let me put this on vibrate. I apologize. Apologiajo. So craziness, man. Craziness. All right, let's continue. Thanks for checking out my video. If you enjoyed this clip and want to see the video in full, consider joining my Patreon at patreon.com/themysticalrebel,
Also consider following me over on TikTok, tiktok.com/themysticalrebel, and check out my website, themysticalrebel.com. I hope to see you there. As always, seek the mysteries.